So I'm just going to get into it. Hey, good afternoon, University Avenue. We're continuing our series with hymn history, and we've moved away from the histories of hymns to our histories, your histories with hymns, which I think has just been so beautiful so far. I've gotten to hear some of y'all's stories about parents, family, these hymns that have mattered to you. Again, this is not the what is the hymn to end all hymns. Mm-hmm. It's what hymn has meaning to you, and that can be not your favorite one. It can just be one that caught you at a specific time, or just one that you like. So again, we're here with Mitch East, who is the executive minister at University Avenue. If you're watching this, or if you're not watching it, he's still the executive minister. But he's here to talk about one of his favorite hymns, a hymn that means something to him. So we always start off with the question, what is your story with hymns in general? Did you grow up in the church? Was it something that you came to later? And so what's your general experience with hymns?
Yeah, so I grew up in Churches of Christ. I grew up going to Round Rock Church of Christ in a suburb north of Austin. And the hymns we sang there were probably 20th century, 19th century hymns. Mm-hmm. And I grew up loving singing. I'm not good at singing, but I love it. I love doing it.
Don't sell yourself short. You can sing.
And so I grew up loving those. Mm-hmm. And I don't really think I had a phase where I didn't like them. I just thought that they were beautiful, and I love the particular way we sang them with the 4-part harmonies. And so my experience with hymns was really positive. I remember going to college and learning a lot more songs and a lot more different styles of worship that I really, really enjoyed, but it didn't detract from that love of those hymns. I would say my understanding or experience with hymns actually grew when I went to England for a year and worked at a church in Oxford called St. Aldate's. Every once in a while they would bring out an oldie that I had never heard of. So like Be Thou My Vision was one that I had never heard of, but was this amazing hymn that they sang.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved it. And it's really interesting. They were a fascinating mix of old and new and contemporary and ancient. And when I told them that my church didn't have instruments, we just sang in 4-part harmonies, and I would show them examples of it, they loved it.
Yeah.
And so it was really neat for these Christians coming from different church backgrounds to show each other the songs that they were most proud of and the styles that they loved, but also they introduced me to hymns further back that I didn't know about. I don't know if you've ever heard And Can It Be, but that was like my anthem whenever I lived there. I loved that song.
Yeah, I was in a group at Harding. We traveled. It's called Bells and Bows, and we finished every single set with that. Harding wanted us to end every single set with it, so I sang that song so many times. And it's really funny, like the Be Thou My Vision, even for me, I'm like, well, my church sang that all the time. Every church has kind of their quirk. And there are songs where, well, we sing this, so everyone sings this. That's just not true. Even within Churches of Christ, you can go from church to church and be like, I've never heard that. So whenever you jump to a different sect of Christianity, it can be even, oh, wow. Especially in England, where it's the birth of so many. Right. I mean, going through hymn history in the last year, how many of these songs came out of, and then there was this English shepherd, or some English sailor or songwriter, some abolitionist who is coming. There's like, this is the hymn. So many of our hymns come out of that. So it's beautiful also because you're singing in the place they're written, and also to see you were a camp counselor, right? There's that kind of branch of it as well. We were both counselors at different points in different camps. That's its own thing, and you just get shown a lot of different sides of it all.
Because of the different directors at the camps, the different youth groups that come to the camps, bring their favorite songs, so you can see those different influences. each summer
Right.
and find out new songs.
Mhm.
That was my experience at the ACU leadership camps.
Or they sing it in a different way. Like I worked at a church camp in Wisconsin, and they did "Created Me a Clean Heart," and they did this version like "Created me a clean heart, oh God," like it was like held out forever, and I was sitting there like, "Well, you're singing it wrong." But there's a whole bunch of different ways that people approach this music. So, with that, what hymn are you bringing us today?
Yes, so I would say the hymn that immediately came to mind was "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." I love the melody of the song. I love the lyrics. I also love that it's one of those very rare songs that I would call happy sad. That it can be done
Yeah.
as a kind of lament during a time of difficulty.
Right.
It can also be sung as a song of celebration after God has been faithful to you in some way.
Right.
And I think even as it's sung at the same time, two different people in the room can be so affected in different ways, which I think demonstrates some of its epic glory, because one person in the room could think, these are all the ways that God has been faithful to me.
Right.
And that's what they're thinking about the whole time. And they are celebrating God's fidelity and loving kindness. And then someone else in the same room listening to the same lyrics needs to hear it because they're struggling to believe that God is faithful.
Yeah.
And simply singing it instills in them a renewed trust that even though they don't see it right now, God is faithful, his faithfulness is great, and he will ultimately, in some way, vindicate me, bring me out of this difficult and trying season of life. I think that's one of the reasons why I love the melody, because it's not a clearly like praise, joy, happy song. But it's also not only a lamenting, hard, difficult dirge. Right. It's both at the same time, and that's the one that sticks out to me, because I've been in both places in life.
Oh yeah, I mean that strikes me. I absolutely love that. I'm thinking through kind of similar songs like "The Steadfast Love of the Lord Never Ceases," and how it's based out of the heart of Lamentations.
Right.
And it's these people that are weeping and have had this trauma, and they're saying, still essentially, "Great is thy faithfulness," in a way. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Or "Blessed be the name of the Lord." Right, straight from Job, you give and take away.
Right.
And I remember even as a kid, I think I was probably like 13 or 14 at my church in Cleburne, and there's a lady who had lost her son in an accident, and we were learning that song as a church, and I remember looking over and seeing her singing that, and that's so seared into my memory about what these songs can mean and how they change from person to person, which is necessary with anything. It's all of this music is very much where you are and what you're feeling. Like with Good Father, that can be something, especially after Father's Day. For some people, it can be very affirming, and for some people, it can be a moment of weeping, and yet they're standing right next to each other in that same mindset. But the core is still there, where it's saying, regardless of whatever situation, this is who you are, and it's always that affirmation. Because even with the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, it's kind of a happy song. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. It's like, yeah, it's one of those. Whereas great is thy faithfulness, you're absolutely right, where you can sit on it, and it can be very meditative. Was there any particular time in your life where where the song specifically came to you, or is this just kind of a general throughout your life, watching it with other people?
I would say two different times in my life. One was when Alice and I were applying to different churches, and we were searching for a preaching ministry position. And at that time, both of my brothers and I were all unemployed. My dad got no sleep at the time. And we were all searching for jobs. We were all very stressed. Our wives and families were very stressed. The grandparents were stressed. And all around the same time, we got careers that we still have today. I've been a preaching minister here for going on 3 years. My brother has been a professor for 4, going on 5 years. My other brother has been a financial planner that whole time as well. And so it was a season where our whole family, not just me as an individual, were recipients of God's providential care for us. And that was one of those moments where it was a response. That it was like it just came busting out of my heart and soul, because I could see, great is thy faithfulness. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. The second time that I can think that this song was meaningful to me was when we were in the NICU with Evelyn, our daughter. For those of you who don't know, our story, basically, she was in the NICU for 11 days after she was born with a very rare condition that she will live with for the rest of her life. And so that was, when we sang that, it was, the song was a reminder that he is faithful, his faithfulness is great. And one specific line that really helped me is, thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. And the reason why that lyric is so important to me is because when you talk about someone and you say they'll never change, it's normally not a compliment, right? If a human being goes through their whole life, man, woman, whoever it is, if they are changeless, it's probably a bad sign. They are stubborn. They are closed down to change. They don't care about maturity.
No self-reflection. Yeah.
Closed off to criticism. They are shut off to God's transforming grace, because they're the same. And they're the same 10 years ago and 20 years ago. But the beauty of God's changelessness is that his nature and character are so full of grace and so full of mercy and so full of love and so full of justice. It won't change to be less than that. He will always be perfectly just and perfectly compassionate and perfectly loving. And so any change,
you can't get better.
You can't get better than God. That's the beauty of that lyric, because the changelessness is matched with his compassion.
Right.
Thou changest not, thy compassion fails not. I think that connecting those two things together made this song really beautiful. And this is why I love just worship and singing these songs in general, because sometimes the song is an expression of where your heart is, because you're in love with God and you want to worship him above all things. But also, sometimes the song acts upon you. Like when you listen to everybody else singing this, when you see that woman singing that song despite everything that's happening to her, you know this song, God is using that song to change her, to transform her, to believe something that's very hard to believe in the moment.
Right.
Because we're in the NICU, it's very hard to believe in God's faithfulness and his compassion, because we're going through such difficult, suffering.
Oh yeah. And then you have this other line in it, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow.
Right.
It's that same kind of, it's not it's not disconnected from what's happening. It's not saying, "Oh, he's faithful. It's you're fine. Like chill out." It's this very real, tangible kind of recognition of reality,
Right.
where it's saying, "No, right now, in this moment, you need this strength," and also that is so intimately tied to hope for tomorrow,
Right.
because the core of both of those, the foundation of both of those, is God's provision and His faithfulness. And that's something that we see time and time and time again. I mean, that's one of the themes throughout the Old Testament and in the New Testament as well, but it's so dominant in what we see with stories, like Hannah or Ruth or all these different characters, and Moses, and God essentially saying, "Hey, I'm faithful," or you have Numbers 23:19 about not changing. It's just again and again and again, and Him saying that I don't lie as well, and this is something that you can really rest on.
Right.
And we see that fulfilled and really embodied in Christ,
Right.
where it's the same thing. It's like, no, I'm the same today, yesterday, and forever.
Right.
And also, I'm looking at this, and I didn't even realize this. So, with the Songs of Faith and Praise, which is the hymnal that I endorse, it has this little verse underneath that it attaches songs to. And it's, sure enough, the same as Steadfast Love of the Lord Never Ceases, which is Lamentations 3, which is, shocker, is my favorite book, Lamentations. Kevin Youngblood really made me love that book more than anything. And the youth group calls me Weepy Boy because of it, but that's okay. So with this is, you talked about your favorite line. And all of that. I know a few different members at UA that love this as well. With songs like this, I always encourage people at the end to use this as a type of prayer. And so with that kind of mindset, what would you say about this hymn to encourage other people as far as making it into a prayer for not just today, for their lives? I think a lot of it you've already said, but just kind of zoning in on a specific aspect.
Whenever you go back and read the Psalms, David and the other psalmists will describe God in the second person, addressing God. You are the rock, you're a mighty fortress, you are strong and compassionate. And that kind of can seem funny sometimes, that we have so many songs dedicated to telling God who He is. I think, does God need a compliment? Does God need to be encouraged by all this? No, I don't think so. I think part of any relationship is telling the truth, and partly to, for among humans, to lift each other up, to challenge each other, because by definition in relationships we're conversational. We speak to one another. Now in God's case, we say those things to praise Him and lift His name above every other name, because He's not like us. He's transcendent and far beyond our weaknesses and limitations. And so those songs, when we say them, we're reminding ourselves that He is a mighty fortress and He is a rock. We're not telling God the truth. In singing these songs and praying these words, we're reminding ourselves of the truth. And that's why we sing them corporately as a body, because we're reminding each other of that.
Yeah. And
so in prayer, sometimes our prayer is a little bit more third person than second person. And I think there's a role for that. There's an important part in kind of asking God to intervene on your behalf, to make Himself, known to you, to reveal Himself, to heal someone you love. All of that is really important. But in addition to intercessory prayers where we ask God for things, I think there are unitive and unifying prayers where you just tell God who he is, not to inform him, but to remind yourself.
Right.
And that speaking in that second person moves away from, like almost praying horizontally to other people and then praying to God. If I was describing Ben, right, I'm like imagining the other people watching this video and I'm describing you but turned away from you. But these prayers, and if you were to use great is thy faithfulness in a second person singular kind of way,
right.
it would be like turning away from the camera and speaking directly to you.
Yeah, great
So,
is, just even...
changing
sometimes
some of the old language.
Where does this change if you say great is your faithfulness?
Great is your faithfulness.
Which is, same thing, but just making a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
And I talk about sometimes how worship, you have kind of three directions. You have up, out, and in, which is what you're talking about, where, but it can be multiple parts of that at the same time, which is one thing I love, where you're singing to each other, but you're also singing to yourself, but you're also singing to God. I think most hymns have more of a direction, so you're absolutely right in that. And it's one of the reasons that I tend to have a little bit of grace towards some of these modern hymns, like Good, Good Father. Some people say it's overly simplistic, but it's and repetitive, the 7-Eleven songs. But it's saying, I'm loved by you. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are. And they say that 1,000 times. But it's because sometimes you need to say that 1,000 times. Sometimes you need to say, God, you're good. Sometimes you need to say, God, you love me, and to affirm that. And it's one of the reasons that hymns are so important, is to not just internalize something, just to be thinking it, but there's something that actually happens. I truly believe when you say something out loud, when you sing something together, there's a depth that's there that is, to me, you can't beat it.
Well, right. I mean, we know the difference between loving someone and telling them, I love you. Right? Why would it be scary if it was the exact same?
Right.
Why would you feel nervous right before you tell someone for the very first time, I love you, unless there was something different about saying it out loud? It's why you have vows, wedding vows, in front of people. There are witnesses to say, I know what you said.
Right.
I was thinking about, you were talking about changing some of the words, and I think we can be, with these and thous, we can often be intimidated, or maybe just
overly critical.
Yeah. But I think sometimes, I don't do this as much, and I think your suggestion is really important. Sometimes I go to pray, and I'm just kind of relying on my own words. And there is a beauty to personal prayer. But sometimes we lack the words, and not all of us are, great poets and songwriters. And so these are actually gifts to us when we're not the best wordsmiths around. We can use people's words and say, great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father, there is no shadow of turning with thee, thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not, as thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. That helps you pray when you don't always have the words.
Yeah. And if it's something that maybe you haven't slowed down and really thought about them to begin with, or at least maybe sections of it, because as thou hast been, you can have a little bit where you maybe sung it so many times you don't stop to think about it. So maybe you could even stop and write it in your words and try and parse that out, but then go back to the original words and with a new understanding and a new appreciation, because there's so much good theology in here. There's so many great truths, and I could sit here and talk about this with you all day. Well, I'll let you go. And but I really, really love this one. Thank you for bringing it, and thank you for taking some time out to talk about it with us.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Mitch again for taking some time out to talk to us about this hymn. I actually did a hymn history on Great is Thy Faithfulness, and if you want to watch that, learn about the background, the story behind this hymn, it will be in the description right below, so just click that and give it a listen. In the meantime, here is Great is Thy Faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thy own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Beautiful hymn, and I hope that it is a blessing for you today and this week, and that you take some time to make this your prayer and really sing this. Actually verbalize this as a prayer. Write it out in your own words if that helps. Some of the things that we talked about. And I'll see you all at the same time next week.